So we start.
Yeah.
Ankit, give me a cue while you go live.
Yes. Okay, ma'am. It's 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, we are live now. You can start, sir.
Yeah. Uh, Good evening, all. We welcome you for today's webinar on ESMO Virtual Congress 2020 highlights. Lupin is a pharmaceutical and innovation-led translational pharma company headquartered at Mumbai. Currently, it's ranked at fifth as per the Indian global revenues. Today, we have with us Dr. Venkat Pradeep Babu Koila. He's done his MD, DNB, and has ECMO certification. Um, Doctor has completed the DNB Medical Oncology from prestigious Rajiv Gandhi Cancer Institute and Research Center, New Delhi. Worked as consultant there for 1 year and now working as assistant professor in Homi Bhabha Cancer Hospital, Vizag. Doctor, we welcome you and the session is over to you. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction, Yuti. Good evening to all of you. Today we are here to discuss some of the highlights of this year's ESMO Virtual Congress 2020. Out of hundreds of abstracts that were presented in ESMO Congress this year, 10 to 15 abstracts that stood apart. For the reason, they might have significant impact on the clinical practice, and they may become as a standard of care compared to what has been existing as of now. So this is my disclaimer before starting the meeting. The research which we are going to discuss that is presented at ESMO, this may not be appropriate for practice changing in Indian setting immediately. However, as a medical oncologist, it is our responsibility to be aware of what's happening globally in oncology research. Intention is to get familiarity with the newer research. So without much ado, let's go on to discuss the important abstracts. So in this discussion, we are going to discuss both positive and negative trials because it is important to be aware of negative trials as well. Negative trials do contribute to the literature and practice as much as the positive trials. So before going to abstracts directly, please closely observe this slide. You can see here the slide focusing on the growth factor pathway from the extracellular surface of the cell till the nucleus. Let's assume that it is a EGFR molecule. When it binds to the receptor, which usually happens in majority of the pathways, it gets dimerages and activates the secondary signaling pathways in the cytoplasm, following which lead to the activation of the pathways in the nucleus, and they ultimately lead to the cancer cell proliferation, survival, and metastasis. So among all the pathways in the secondary pathways in the cytoplasm, there are two pathways that are very important, and we are going to discuss these pathways and the targeting molecules in some of the very important abstracts. The first pathway is AKT-mTOR pathway, and second pathway is RAS-RAF pathway. Okay, so let's move forward. Coming to abstract one, this is from genitourinary cancers. Is hypertension 150. So the hypertension 150 study It is a phase 3 double-blind placebo-controlled study. It's about blocking PI3K-mTOR pathway and its role in metastatic castration-resistant prostate cancer. It is presented in ESMO by Joan de Bono et al. From the Institute of Cancer Research from London. So the main intention of this trial, hypertension trial, is to evaluate the role of new molecule called ipatasertib. It is a AKT inhibitor. AKT is a molecule, it's a cytoplasmic protein in the mTOR pathway. Ipatasertib is its inhibitor and its role in mCRPC. Coming to background, why this new molecule is being tried in metastatic CRPC, the hypothesis goes like this. In metastatic prostate cancer, it is hypothesized that there is a crosstalk between mTOR AKT pathway and androgen receptor pathway. As of now, the molecules which we use in the clinical setting, they predominantly inhibit androgen receptor pathway, like abiraterone, enzalutamide, directly or indirectly they act on AR pathway, both in hormone setting and metastatic CRPC also. But here in this trial, they tried this inhibiting dual pathways. They hypothesized that if we inhibit both the pathways, it may result in increased anti-tumor activity because mTOR pathway and AR pathway has cross connections. And it may be responsible for some of the resistance we see after use of AR inhibitors. So this we have discussed, this is ipatasertib, and it inhibits competitively all three isoforms of AKT. So coming to the trial schema diagram, so the population included in this population are the first-line metastatic CRPC treatment naive first-line patients. There is no, the patient should not have any treatment in the metastatic setting. However, he might have received docetaxel in the adjuvant setting or hormone sensitive setting. Coming to the stratification factors by which the patients are divided, and what they want to see after the results are that whether the patients have PTEN loss by IHC testing, and if the patients have used docetaxel in HSPC setting, and whether the progression is by PSA or there is a gross radiographic progression like liver and lung mets, and whether patients belong to the Asian or non-Asian or Western or non-Western. The primary endpoint they want to look at is that RPFS, that is radiographic PFS. So how we define that? It is by using PCWG criteria. What is this? It is Prostate Cancer Working Group criteria. They have established criteria to say, to define radiographic progression on the imaging. So they want to see this, whether adding ipatasertib to the standard of care, it will result in prolonged radiographic progression-free survival for the patients with mCRPC in all the populations, as well as those patients who have PTEN loss by IHC. In the secondary endpoints, what they want to check is whether there is any benefit in the skeletal-related events, and among the SREs, they have taken only pain progression. And how many patients, what is the time required to initiate the chemotherapy after use of this combination versus placebo? Also, they have to check whether the PTEN loss by IHC with PTEN loss by NGS. So how they define PTEN loss by IHC is that among the tumor cells that they have checked, and at least 50% of the tumor cells must be having no expression of PTEN. So total population, around 1100 patients were taken, and they are equally distributed to the ipatasertib arm versus placebo arm. In the ipatasertib arm, abiraterone plus prednisolone is added. In the similar way, abiraterone prednisolone is combined with placebo in the other arm. So the median follow-up is nearly 19 months. This duration of 19 months, we know, like in prostate cancer, we have very prolonged PFS for many of the drugs. So this 19 months, it is enough for calculating the RPFS, but not for overall survival. So when we see the benefit at 19 months of follow-up, patients who have received ipatasertib, they have 2 months of RPFS benefit with a relative improvement of 23%. You can see here the curves are separated at 19 months, and it is only what we are seeing is, please remember, this is radiographic progression-free survival only. In this first plot, please focus here, where in the subset patients who have received docetaxel prior in the hormone sensitive setting, they do not benefit from ipatasertib. The reasons are unknown. Still, the trial is not completed, so we might know the reason by the end of the trial. So to assess other secondary outcomes as planned, like we have seen some of the endpoints, there are no enough events for statistical analysis as of now by the time this abstract is presented. However, there is important observation that there is a concordance between PTEN loss by ISC and PTEN loss by NGS. That means if there is a mutation in the gene, the expression of protein is also lost. Most important side effects of hepatocytic are diarrhea and rash they have seen in the trial. But adverse effects leading to the coming to the toxicity profile, this is the hepatocytic arm. In the hepatocytic arm, there is more number of treatment discontinuations and more number of dose reductions compared to the placebo and abiraterone. Coming to the conclusion of this abstract, combination of hepatocytic, abiraterone, and prednisolone, it improves radiographic PFS and PSA progression in untreated MCRPC in the first line, at least in patients who have PTEN loss. However, we need to await much more results and the conclusion of the trial. Coming to the abstract 2, this is from lung cancer. The trial is CodeBreak 100 trial. What is this CodeBreak 100? This is phase 1 and 2 trial that tested the safety and tolerability of newer drug, that is AMG 510 sotorasib in multiple solid cancer. In last year ESMO, there is a ESMO news. There is a headlines about the KRAS inhibitor in lung cancer as well as other solid cancer. The molecule is AMG 510. This is developed by Amgen Labs. The chemical name is sotorasib. So in this ESMO, they have presented the results from NSCLC subset, and it was presented by Dr. David Hong et al. From MD Anderson University, USA. So what is sotorasib? It is first in class KRAS G12C inhibitor. What is this G12C? Let's see. So this is the RAS pathway. Whenever receptor tyrosine kinase is activated by growth signal or spontaneously due to the mutation, there is activation of the secondary pathways, RAS, RAF, MEK, ERK, and then the nuclear pathways. And we know these results in survival, increased lipid metabolism, increase in transcription factors which help in angiogenesis and metastasis. So coming to RAS pathway, it is a gene which encodes for KRAS protein that acts as GTPase pathway. So it shifts GTP to GDP and then GDP to GTP depending upon the signals. There are three main types of RAS proteins. There are KRAS, NRAS, and HRAS. And among these, KRAS is the predominant driver proto-oncogene in multiple types of cancers. So what is background of sotorasib? KRAS mutations, they are known in cancer for more than 4 decades. It's an important driver mutation in many cancers, one of which is lung cancer. So coming to this, what is G12C? It is a position of gene where glycine to cysteine missense mutation takes place, and this G12C accounts for 44% of all KRAS mutations. And this this leads to the active configuration of KRAS, leading to activation of downstream signaling pathways. This KRAS P12C accounts for 13% of all lung NSCLCs, 3 to 5% of colorectal cancers, and 1 to 3% of other solid cancers. In a way, this is a basket trial because it has used same biomarker in a number of solid cancers. So it is the first RAS inhibitor. Why it is so special? Till now we have EGFR inhibitor, we have BRAF inhibitors, we have MEK inhibitors, but this is first in class RAS inhibitor. This is unmet need till now. So this CodeBreak trial, it is a phase 1 multi-center open label trial, including many of the solid cancers which are harboring KRAS mutations. This trial included dose escalation and expansion cohort. What is expansion cohort? So initially they will see whether this drug is working or not, is it safe or not, and if the primary endpoints are achieved, then they will recruit more and more patients. That is expansion cohort. So this sotorasib, this is administered orally. This is oral drug once daily for 21-day cycle. And there are 4 cohorts included, 4 doses that are included, that is 180 mg, 360, 720, and 960 mg. And only maximum of 4 patients were enrolled in each cohort to see safety. So the primary endpoint of study was safety. Secondary endpoints are objective response rate, disease control rate. However, they want to see if there are more amount of alleles with KRAS, more amount of gene allelic frequency, like what we check in T790M mutation. If there is more allele frequency, is there a more amount of response on sotorasib? They want to see that. And also, is there any correlation with the PDL1 level and response to sotorasib? This is most important point which we have to note here. Out of the 60 patients that are included, majority are elderly patients. They are 68 years at the time of enrollment. And more than 75% of patients, they are heavily pre-treated. They received more than 2 lines of treatment. So nearly 70 years of age, receiving more than 2 lines of treatment, if any drug can show even some activity, that is really something to look for. So what is the response to sotorasib? So anti-cancer activity has seen across all the dose levels, from the lowest 180 mg to 960 mg, and a confirmed response, overall response rate of 32% and disease control rate of 88%. So which includes stable disease, majority of stable diseases. So 88% of disease control rate has been seen. And the most important thing, median duration of response is nearly 11 months. This is hardly seen now in a patient who are heavily pre-treated with 2 or more lines. 10 out of 19 patients are still in response, as we are discussing at the other health presented in ESMO. Tumor shrinkage was observed in nearly 3/4 of the patients at first 6-week assessment. No grade 4 or grade 5 side effects are seen. This is what we look out for when we are trying some drug in very elderly population of 70 years. So there is a median PFS of 6.3 months in this heavily pre-treated NSCLC. So coming to the conclusion, even in patients who are heavily pre-treated, if they have KRAS mutation, which occurs in nearly 13% of the patients, if we treat with sotorasib, we can achieve a median PFS of 6.3 months. This is really interesting. We have to await survival data. And however, the secondary endpoint like KRAS mutation allelic frequency do not correlate with the sotorasib outcome, nor it has relation with PDL1 expression. Coming to abstract 3, this is under basket trial, that is LEAP 005. So what is LEAP 005? It is open label phase 2 multi-cohort study in heavily pre-treated solid cancers. So here, this year, it is interesting because we are seeing some hope in patients who are heavily pre-treated and elderly patients also. This is presented by Dr. Jarni Levin et al. From Germany. So in the LEAP 005, the molecules that were used are a combo of anti-angiogenic lenvatinib and checkpoint inhibitor pembrolizumab in the resistant set of cancer. Why we are saying resistant set of cancer? We'll see what are the cohorts that are included in this trial. Coming to the background, why lenvatinib plus pembrolizumab has been selected in this resistant cancers. We know lenvatinib, it is a multi-tyrosine kinase inhibitor, and it is angiogenic inhibitor. And pembrolizumab is an anti-PD-1 agent. It has shown promising outcomes in early phase trials. And one of the FDA approval has been done with the same combination, that is in the advanced endometrial cancer who are not eligible for any surgery or curative radiation. This has shown really good response. That's why it has received accelerated approval, this combination in endometrial cancer. The specialty is not just in advanced setting. This combo, it works in non-MSI high or MMR proficient setting. So we have immunotherapies in subgroups with MSI high and PDL1 positive subsets, like pembrolizumab, nivolumab. They are approved in tumor agnostically in almost all cancers. But we have no options in biomarker negative heavily pretreated patients in almost any of the solid cancers. So this accelerated approval has been done for endometrial cancer under Project Orbis. What is Project Orbis? So Project Orbis is a collaboration between USA, Canada, and Australia approval authorities to make the drugs which have good efficacy available for the patients in need. Because normal trial process, they take years and years. So in order to avoid avoid the deprivation of benefit of these new molecules to the patients who are in need, there is this Project Orbis has been initiated. So let's see this phase 2 LEAP 005, which is trying to evaluate the efficacy and safety of this combo in previously treated advanced solid cancers. So see the cohorts that are included there. This is really interesting. Triple negative breast cancer, ovarian, gastric, colorectal cancer, which is non-MSI high or which is MMR proficient, and glioblastoma multiforme or biliary tract cancer. In this biliary tract cancer, gallbladder is included, but ample of water is excluded. So patient has received lenvatinib 20 milligrams per day, pembrolizumab 200 milligrams, 3 weekly for up to 35 cycles or progression or toxicity. So primary endpoints are mainly response rates and safety. This is important slide which we want to look at. Second or third line TNBC, fourth line of ovarian cancer, third line in gastric cancer, third line in colorectal cancer, second line in glioblastoma and biliary tract cancers. So we know that as of now, in the current practice, many of the patients will make them eligible for best supportive care only, even if the patient is sometimes PS1 or 2. But here, the combo is showing some significant response. What are the response rates? It is 30% in triple negative breast cancer, almost same in ovarian cancer, 10% in gastric cancer and biliary tract cancer, and 16% in glioblastoma, and 21% in colorectal cancer. This is interesting. Median duration of response was 3.2 months in glioblastoma, 5.3 months in biliary tract cancers. Highest is in colorectal cancer, which is 10.4 months and still going on. The response median duration had not reached in other cohorts. It is still going on. So conclusion is lenvatinib plus pembrolizumab has showed promising anti-tumor activity with manageable toxicity across previously treated tumor cohorts evaluated in LEAP 005, which we have seen. And as the study reached its primary endpoints now, all the expansion cohorts will now take place with enrolling nearly 100 patients with each cohort. Coming to abstract 4. It is on one of the resistant cancer, that is pancreatic cancer. It is presented from CCTG group, that is Canadian Cancer Trials Group, PA7 trial. The background, what is the background of this trial is that we know compared to the gemcitabine alone, gemcitabine plus nab-paclitaxel has improved survival in pancreatic cancer metastatic setting based on MPACT trial. So the hypothesis is, because this is so much of resistant cancer and we do not have much of the options in metastatic pancreatic cancer, apart from recently approved M-FOLFIRINOX, if we add some more drugs, new armamentarium drugs to the standard of care, will it increase survival in this dreaded cancer? So let's see PA7 trial. This is randomized phase 2 study. It is presented by Daniel Renouf et al. From Vancouver, Canada. So the aim is to check the efficacy and safety of anti-PD-L1 antibody, durvalumab, and anti-CTLA4 antibody, tremelimumab, to the existing standard of care, that is gemcitabine plus nab-paclitaxel. So we know the arms 1 and 2 by now. That is durva and tremi added to gem nab-pacli, the arm 2, and standard of care is arm 1, gem plus nab-pacli. So 191 patients were enrolled in this study. A safety run of durva plus tremi is done in 11 patients. After that, 180 patients, they are randomized into 2:1 ratio. So we know the schedule of gem nab-pacli. It is 1:8:15 according to standard doses. The dose of durvalumab used here is 1500 mg on day 1, Q28 days. Tremelimumab was used only in first 4 cycles, 75 mg day 1. So how they stratified. Only patients with ECOG 0 or 1 are allowed in the trial. And patients, if whether they have received prior adjuvant therapy or not, they're stratified based on that. So the primary endpoint is OS. Why primary endpoint is OS here? We know the pancreas achieving to calculate OS is very easy because it is aggressive cancer. The median survival rate is very less, so we can see the OS easily in such cancers. The secondary endpoints are PFS, safety, and tertiary endpoints are they want to see for any correlative studies. Coming to the patient characteristics, you can see here majority of the patients are white people, Asians are very less, ECOG performance of 0 or 1 are only allowed. Majority of the patients have not received any adjuvant therapy. Nearly 90% of patients haven't received any prior adjuvant therapy. Here also we can see the age of the patient enrolled in the trial 64 and 65. Why this is important? Because when we see patients greater than 60 years, we have tendency, not all, majority have a tendency to see for the options that are less toxic. But see here in this trial, at the age of 65, they are giving 4 drugs: gemcitabine, nab-paclitaxel, durvalumab, and tremelimumab. See the response rates. Response rates, the complete response are not seen with even in this combination. There is no single complete response. Coming to the overall survival, there is 1 month difference, but it is not statistically significant. The same is with PFS. This is a negative trial. Even with combination of such very efficient, so-called efficient molecules, there is no much benefit in terms of OS or even PFS. Coming to toxicity, this is not much as expected with these two molecules, but there's significant of lymphopenia, grade 3 or greater, in patients who have received durva plus tremi. Nearly 38% of patients have lymphopenia. So what is the conclusion? Even the addition of dual immune checkpoint inhibitor, that is PD-L1 and CTLA-4, to the existing standard of care did not result in significant improvement in any of the parameters. So even now, gemcitabine plus nab-paclitaxel is still the standard of care for metastatic pancreatic cancer in first line. Coming to the abstract 5, IMpassion 031. This is another interesting abstract in terms of immunotherapy in breast cancer. What is IMpassion 031? So we know IMpassion 130, 131, which we are going to discuss about that. This IMpassion 031, it is a global phase 3 double-blind randomized multi-center trial. It is presented by Dr. Nadia Herbeck from Germany. So what they wanted to see is that whether adding atezolizumab to the standard chemotherapy will result in more pathological complete responses in patients with stage 2, stage 3 early TNBC. However, please see the arms here. The drug they have used is nab-paclitaxel, not paclitaxel. Why they have used nab-paclitaxel? We commonly do not use nab-paclitaxel as a in neoadjuvant or adjuvant setting, right? So why they have used nab-paclitaxel? There is a big story behind this. We are going to discuss in the next slide. So the standard chemotherapy is AC followed by T or T followed by AC. They have added atezolizumab to both T and AC. However, they have used nab-paclitaxel instead of paclitaxel. The reason is this. Coming to the background of why this trial is done, we know that atezolizumab is a PD-L1 antibody, and it has shown its efficacy in various cancers like urothelial cancer. And coming to this specific set of TNBC, we know among all the subsets of breast cancer, TNBC has a relatively high PD-L1 expression. It is highly immunogenic. It has more tumor mutation burden. It has high levels of tumor infiltrating lymphocytes. So if we see a biopsy report, in many institutes, they will report the tumor infiltrating lymphocytes also, whether lymphocyte rich tumor specimen, even in small biopsy, they can report that. So because of this high TMB and TILs in its nature, it suggests a therapeutic opportunity for immunotherapy particularly checkpoint inhibitors. So ETG alone, as in combination with nab-paclitaxel, is well tolerated, and this combination has been approved in metastatic TNBC in patients who are having PD-L1 greater than 1% at least, supporting its investigation in the early stage disease. So already there is approval of Etejo plus nab-paclitaxel. Now we are seeing the same combination in the early TNBC. Please see this, focus on this slide. There are 4 settings in a breast cancer in TNBC where atezolizumab has been tried. One is neoadjuvant setting, which we are discussing now. And second is neoadjuvant plus adjuvant setting, that is NeoTRIPA PD-L1 trial. Third is adjuvant setting, IM Passion 030. And the fourth is metastatic setting. You can focus on IM Passion 130 and 131. The arms are almost same. When you see focus on IM Passion 131, you can see it is a failed trial. What they have used is atezolizumab plus pacli versus paclitaxel. Such a big company evaluating such a big molecule, why this failure? They hypothesize that we know pacli definitely needs steroids. Probably use of such steroids might have attenuated the effect of atezolizumab. So they have hypothesized that, and they have used in the next trial, IM Passion 130, they have replaced paclitaxel with nab-paclitaxel, which will not need steroid pre-medication. And it has shown and met its endpoint of PFS in a patients who have PD-L1 positivity greater than 1%, and because of that, it has received approval by FDA in this setting. With the same enthusiasm, they are now trying in the IM Passion 031 whether adding Tecentriq, that is atezolizumab, to the new paclitaxel will achieve more and more PCRs. What are the methods they have used? Tumor size greater than 2 centimeters and patients with good performance status are included in this trial. Nearly 100 patients in each arm. What is the other arm? Atezolizumab versus placebo. So what are the arms? 8 cycles of nab-paclitaxel, 4 cycles of nab-paclitaxel, 4 cycles of AC chemotherapy, atezolizumab throughout with paclitaxel as well as AC chemotherapy. And patients, after the completion of surgery, they were unblinded. They were told, you have received atezolizumab, you haven't received atezolizumab, and the patients who have received atezolizumab, they continue to receive the same drug for 11 more doses. So this is the scheme of the diagram. You can see here, atezolizumab arm after surgery, they continue to receive 11 more doses. So what we have looked at is, after completion of this therapy, in the surgical specimen, we have looked at PCR rates. It is the first primary endpoint of this trial. They want to look PCR in overall population, that is ITT, intention to treat population, as well as in PD-L1 positive subset, whether PD-L1 have more PCRs compared to overall population. Result is really interesting. We'll go and see that. So the primary endpoint has been met. There's 16.5% difference in PCRs favoring the atezolizumab arm, which have more PCRs compared to the chemo alone arm. Now the interesting slide. This is overall population, that is PD-L1 positive population. They have benefit of 19.5% different in terms of PCR, and it's statistically significant. This is PD-L1 negative population. Even in these population, this statistically significant and real benefit has been seen in terms of PCR. So the conclusion is that PD-L1 is not a perfect biomarker, at least in this setting, for atezolizumab to choose further immunotherapy. So the conclusion is there are more PCRs definitely in early TNBC with atezolizumab and chemotherapy than chemo alone, irrespective of PD-L1 status. However, we need more perfect biomarkers to select population for immunotherapy in this setting. Coming to abstract 6. This is again from the RCC, urothelial genitourinary checkmate 9ER trial. So what is Checkmate 9ER trial? It is a randomized phase 3 trial in first line of advanced RCC setting. So this is the setting where we have, in recent last 3 years, we have seen a dramatic change in the standard of care and recommendations. So initially we have only sunitinib. Later on, we have stratification based upon good risk, intermediate, and poor risk. And we have seen immunotherapy making its way into the first line RCC setting in the form of nivolumab plus ipilimumab, and then later it was seen pembrolizumab axitinib has excellent responses. It's a combination of checkpoint inhibitor and TKI, and it has paved its way into the first line, and now till now it is standard of care pembro plus axitinib. Now, this is another attempt where another combination of nivolumab plus cabozantinib has been tried in this trial. This is presented by Dr. Tony Churi from Dana-Farber Cancer Institute, USA. Let's see what are the results. What is the background? Why this combination? Why nivolumab has been combined with cabozantinib? It can be combined with axitinib, anything else, but why nivolumab and cabozantinib? This is the reason. So cabozantinib, we know it is a multi-tyrosine kinase inhibitor. It inhibits MET, VEGFR, AXL, and Z proteins. This AXL is very important. It is one of the proteins that is upregulated when you subject or treat RCC with the first generation TKIs. AXL is one of the expression of AXL or upregulation is one of the mechanism for resistance after treating with TKIs. So that's why cabozantinib is very effective in targeting this AXL protein. That's why it has very high activity in the second line RCC population. Along with this inhibition of proteins, it is seen that it has immunomodulatory properties. How? We know that presence of tumor itself is a immune suppressive environment. So every tumor in varied degrees has immunosuppressive environment around it, out of which main key players for that immunosuppression are myeloid-derived suppressor cells, MDSCs, that are derived from bone marrow. Cabozantinib has been seen that it can act in decreasing number of myeloid-derived suppressor cells in the tumor microenvironment. So, hello.
Yes, sir, audible.
Yeah. So furthermore, this drug has been shown to increase the regulatory T cell PD-L1 expression and increase the effector CD8 cells that can effectively act on tumor cells. So it has some properties which can better our innate and adaptive immunotherapy towards the tumor. And we know that nivolumab has a good activity in second line. So nivolumab and cabozantinib has demonstrated efficacy. So hence the combination. So this is the study design of Checkmate 9ER. The key inclusion criteria is untreated first-line metastatic RCC. Only clear cell RCC has been included in this trial. And please note, all IMDC risk groups has been included. And they have stratified what are the responses based on IMDC risk score on tumor PD-L1 expression and geographic location, West versus White. So West versus Asian. The median follow-up of study is nearly 18 months. This is enough to see the overall survival rate in metastatic RCC. The standard dose of nivolumab has been used every 2 weekly, 240 mg. Cabozantinib dose is 40 milligrams orally daily versus the standard of care, that is sunitinib, 50 mg, 4 weeks on and 2 weeks off. The primary endpoint is PFS. The secondary endpoint is overall survival and safety. So, this is the PFS as per BICR. BICR is independent committee review, blinded independent committee review, which has seen that almost all the subsets, whether it is the irrespective of region, whether it is Europe or rest of the world, irrespective of IMDC risk groups, irrespective of PD-L1 expression, age more than or less than 65 years, irrespective of sex and performance status and metastatic sites. Almost all the sites, they favor the combination compared to sunitinib. Same with the overall PFS. So you can see here, the PFS is nearly double with nivo plus cabozantinib combination, whereas sunitinib it is 8.3 months, it is 16.6 months with nivo cabo combination. And see the hazard ratio, nearly 50% of the patients, they have benefited from the progression when used combination. And survival, it is same. Nearly 40% of the patient, they are prevented from death due to RCC when used the combination instead of sunitinib alone. The response rates, they are nearly doubled. And the most interesting part is, despite the combination, side effects are not more than in sunitinib arm. We know that sunitinib is also not an easy molecule to tolerate by the patient. So both in sunitinib and cabozantinib arms, there were more than 50% dose reductions, but discontinuation rates are really, really low. Discontinuation rates are nearly 15% in cabozantinib arm and 8% in sunitinib. So quality of life is well maintained and in fact is better in combination. So to measure the quality of life, they have used two scales for the objective reflection of the maintenance of quality with this combination. This is FKSI 19 and this is FKSI scales, which they have used in this trial. What is FKSI? It is function of the cancer patient, functionality of the cancer patients, and KSI is the kidney symptom index. These are kidney cancer specific quality of life indexes. They have used, and both of these indexes, they have favored the combination compared to the single agent of sunitinib. This is really good for patients and particularly in Indian settings. Why Indian setting? Because we know pembrolizumab, it is quite costly drug for the Indian patient to afford, and nivolumab, it is relatively cheaper. And if cabozantinib is released, this is the combination we are looking forward to. So coming to the conclusion, nivo plus cabozantinib, it demonstrated superior PFS, overall survival and response rate compared to the sunitinib alone in first-line advanced RCC. The safety profile of this combination was manageable and consistent with the already known effects of single agents of nivo and cabo. This might act as a new standard of care in advanced RCC. But there we have several combinations like pembro plus axitinib from Keynote trial, nivo plus cabo from this trial, and checkmate trial EP plus nivo. So what is the first line which we have to look for if the patient is symptomatic and have heavy disease burden? See the curves. In the EP nivo arm, the curves are not getting separated till 6 months of timeline. So if we want early responses, if we want more tumor burden reduction, we have to look towards either pembro plus axi or nivo plus cabo. So this is about checkmate 9-year trial. This is our abstract which we are going to present in ESMO Asia this year from Rajiv Gandhi Cancer Institute. This is about the analysis of spatial heterogeneity of responses in metastatic sites with nivolumab in RCC. What does it mean? Not all the sites of the metastasis will respond equally to the nivolumab or any immunotherapy. It is seen that if patients with RCC have multiple sites of metastasis, each site will respond different to the nivolumab. We have seen that the best response is seen in lymph nodes, followed by adrenals, followed by peritoneum, and the least response is seen in the soft tissue lesions. This is an interesting abstract because this will help us in choosing carefully about the radiation in palliative setting. Coming to the abstract 7, CROWN study. This is again from lung cancer. This CROWN study is phase 3 multi-center randomized study. This is the results of this trial were presented by Dr. Benjamin Solomon from Peter MacCallum Cancer Center, Australia. So what this CROWN study looking is the efficacy and safety of lorlatinib in first-line ALK-positive lung cancers compared to the current standard of care. We know that in the current standard of care, we have crizotinib, serotinib, as well as alectinib. However, in this trial, they have taken crizotinib as the standard of care. Coming to the background, why this lorlatinib is so much important in ALK-rearranged cancers. We know lung cancer is very common, and NSCLC accounts for 80% of all lung cancers, and all creatinine cancers account for 5 to 15% of all NSCLCs. 5% of Western population, and it's relatively high in Asian population, nearly 15% in when we test by IHC. In November 2nd, 2 years ago, that is in 2018, FDA has given accelerated approval to lorlatinib for ALK positive metastatic NLC who has progressed on at least one ALK inhibitors. It can be crizotinib or alectinib. However, this is based on a small trial which has shown very excellent response rate and duration of response and intracranial response rate. And based on the small trial, FDA has approved, given accelerated approval. And any accelerated approval should be confirmed in a larger trial. And CROWN is such confirmatory trial for lorlatinib. And it also seeks to approval in the first line all creatinine NSCLC. So this is the schema of a CROWN trial. They have included stage 3B and stage 4 all positive NSCLC. There is no prior systemic treatment in the metastatic setting. Performance status of 2 is also allowed in this trial, and CNS metastases are allowed, but they should not have been treated by any radiation or etc. And along with the brain met, there should be measurable lesion in the systemic.
With newer terms right away.
So coming to the dose of lorlatinib is 100 milligrams once daily. The primary endpoint is PFS. See, such a widening of curves rarely we see in the medical oncology. At 12 months of PFS, we should remember these are interim results. The CROWN trial is still recruiting, and trial is still going on. We have to await results of overall median PFS. This is 12-month PFS rate, and it is really nearly double, 40% in the crizotinib, nearly 80% in the lorlatinib. What it means is 80% of the patients on lorlatinib hasn't progressed at 1 year rate, at 1 year timeline, whereas nearly 60% of patients have progressed on crizotinib. See the HR value. Rarely we have opportunity to see such HR values, where 72% of patient is being benefited from the molecule at 1 year. So overall response rate assessed by independent committee review is nearly 3/4 of the patient in lorlatinib has responded, whereas only 60% of the patients have responded in crizotinib. This is very important for lung cancer perspective because intracranial CR rate is 71%. Although numbers are really low, but see the CR rate, intracranial CR rate in the patients who are having measurable brain mets, it is 71% compared to only 8% in crizotinib. And it was seen that lorlatinib prevents or it delays the presence of the presentation of the brain mets in patients who were treated on ALK positive. So coming to the toxicity, as you have seen 100 milligrams dose, most common adverse reaction we see are edema, peripheral neuropathy, and cognitive effects in at least more than 20% of the patients. The most common laboratory abnormalities we see are hypercholesterolemia and hypertriglyceridemia. We have seen excellent responses intracranially. However, there are some warnings also. What are the warnings with lorlatinib? Severe hepatotoxicity may be seen if we combine lorlatinib with CYP3A4 inhibitors like rifampin. Particularly in Indian setting, it becomes very important. TB is rampant in India as well as the lung cancer. So many of the patients, they receive a combination of lung cancer therapy as well as tuberculosis therapy. But we should be cautious that not to combine rifampin and lorlatinib in any patient, for it may result in severe hepatotoxicity. Along with intracranial activity, there are CNS side effects also that are reported with lorlatinib in more than half of the patients who are on treatment. These included seizures, hallucinations, mood swings, including suicidal ideations up to 1.5% of the treated population, and speech defects and sleep deprivation. These are really concerning. We should await the real world data of because the same is reported with alpelisib also, PI3K inhibitor in breast cancer, the suicidal ideation. We have to await real world data of this toxicity. three important things which we have to look at while using lorlatinib is to check on ECG, look for AV block, lipid profile, look for hypertriglyceridemia, hypercholesterolemia, and if the patient is complaining of dyspnea. Apart from thinking of disease progression, we should think of ILD, and we have to watch out in CT scan. So this is about Crown trial. So this is the abstract which we have presented in last year WCLC in Barcelona. This is how can we predict the ALK mutations based upon the initial PET-CT we do on for staging evaluation. This we have presented in last year WCLC. Coming to the abstract 8, ADARA trial. This is example of the lung cancer. It is international randomized double-blind phase 3 trial. This is also, we are talking about interim analysis. This is presented by Dr. Masahiro Soboi from National Cancer Center and Thoracic Oncology, Japan. What this trial, another trial has checked is the use of osimertinib as an adjuvant therapy in completely resected EGFR mutant lung cancer. Why we should use osimertinib as adjuvant therapy when it acts excellently in metastatic setting? Aren't we exhausting one more excellent therapy in the adjuvant therapy? If we use in adjuvant therapy and patient progresses, we have very little options or very few good options in metastatic setting. But why we should use in adjuvant therapy? Because if the patient relapses after adjuvant therapy, some of the patients, they are never eligible for therapy because the relapse is so high and so devastating that patients are not in a condition to receive any sort of therapy. Also, there are some more important factors which we are seeing in this background. So patients with stage 1, 2 or 3A NSCLC, they are at substantial risk of recurrence and death due to lung cancer even after complete surgical resection and adjuvant chemotherapy. When we see the relapse rates, even in stage 1B, it is nearly 40 to 50%. It is 55 to 70% in stage 2. And even more, patients relapse in stage 3A and eventually they die of the disease despite so much potentially curative and we can say morbid surgery and chemotherapy. See, nearly 3/4 of the patients, they are dying of the disease even when they are presenting in early cancers. That's why we need some more therapy which might prevent these recurrences or at least reduce them. So due to these reasons, several attempts were made to define whether we can give some more adjuvant therapy or any genotype related therapies. In 2011, such attempt was made by scientists or doctors from MSKCC. They showed that TKIs may benefit in terms of decreased recurrence after resection, but it is non-randomized and retrospective data. So there are some more adjuvant studies, the Radiant study and adjuvant CTON from China. Both are randomized studies, but the design is so faulty that it has both the trials have attracted so much of criticism. The SELECT trial, which was very informative, but it is a single arm trial, so it really do not contribute much. So the other trial, which we are going to discuss now, might help in answering this question. So 682 population patients were included in 1:1 randomization. How they randomized? They have checked EGFR mutation. Only patients who are completely resected, R0 resection, and EGFR mutation positive, they were included in the study. And among EGFR mutation population, the standard of care is after the adjuvant chemotherapy, it is just to follow up. So that is the standard of care arm. And the other arm, experimental arm, is to give osimertinib in this other half of the population. So osimertinib versus placebo in these two arms. The primary endpoint is disease-free survival. This is adjuvant setting, so DFS in stage 2 and 3A disease. So this is the schema of the diagram. Schema diagram of the ADARA trial. So see the stratification factors. They want to know which stage has been benefited with osimertinib much, whether it is stage 1, stage 2 or stage 3A. And only 2 mutations are allowed in this trial, exon 19 deletion and exon 21 L858R. And Asian versus non-Asian. So the primary endpoint is DFS. A HR of 0.17 has been achieved. What is 0.17? Which means 83% of the population, they are prevented from recurrence if we use osimertinib in EGFR mutated completely resected population. It is something unimaginable. This translated to absolute difference of DFS of 46% at 2 years. 90% of the patients who received osimertinib are disease-free, whereas only 44% of the patients who haven't received any drug. So, see the curves, how they are separated. Stage 2, 3A and the overall population, they are very much widely separated. And see the hazard ratios, 0.17, 0.20, 80% of the population getting benefited with this. However, to all the excitement, there are some caution also. See the recurrences. The left one is patients under osimertinib, right one is under placebo. Okay, there included lung, lymph node, CNS. There are few recurrences compared to the only observation arm, and particularly delayed the CNS recurrence. And it is seen that it is the conditional probability of CNS recurrence at 18 months. Less than 1% of osimertinib have CNS recurrences, whereas in the observation arm, 9% had CNS recurrences. What is the conclusion? There is clinically meaningful improvement in the CNS disease-free survival with osimertinib. There is nearly 82% reduction in the risk of CNS disease, recurrence, or death. So these results support osimertinib usage in the EGFR mutated NSCLC setting. However, what is the caution? There is no OS data. So if there is no OS benefit, which will take some more time because it is adjuvant setting, HR of 0.17 will not matter ultimately. So only if there is OS benefit, we can use such a costly and very effective molecule in the adjuvant setting because we are sacrificing the same in the metastatic setting. So this is about ADARA trial. Coming to this use of osimertinib, we have reported the first time the incidence of T790M mutation in India from Rajiv Gandhi Cancer Institute. The incidence of T790M in Indian population nearly 52.4%, although the numbers are less. It is the first paper published in Lung India. Coming to the abstract 9, the ASCENT study. What is ASCENT study? We know about the ASCENT study of certinib in lung cancer. This ASCENT study is about breast cancer. It's a phase 3 randomized multi-center study. It is presented by Dr. Aditya Bardia from Harvard Medical School, USA. It is a confirmatory trial for a newer molecule called sacituzumab govitecan, an antibody drug conjugate. It is the first antibody drug conjugate in the TNBC setting. What is the background? We know TNBC have it is aggressive disease. Definitely, we see more recurrences than any other subset, and we have fewer options apart from the recent immunotherapy, which we have discussed, atezolizumab, only in the first line setting. But in the pre-treated, heavily pre-treated TNBC population, apart from the conventional chemotherapy, which have fewer response rates in the later lines, we do not have much options. So in the phase 1 and 2 study, this sacituzumab govitecan demonstrated nearly 33% of response rates and median PFS of 5.5 months in heavily treated population. So this led to the accelerated US FDA approval in this setting, heavily pre-treated TNBC setting. So this study is the confirmatory trial, randomized phase 3 trial for the same molecule. So what is sacituzumab govitecan? It is the first-in-class ADC, antibody drug conjugate. We have other antibody drug conjugates for HER2 positive breast cancers like TDM1, but in TNBC we do not have till now. This is the first molecule. What is the drug that is conjugated to the antibody? It is the active metabolites of irinotecan, that is SN38, which is much more active than irinotecan itself. The interesting part is about this ADC is the coupling of drug and antibody is through a unique hydrolyzable linker. What is so unique about this linker? all the ADCs, majority of ADCs, which we see in the oncology, how they act is they go and bind to the particular receptor, and it needs tumor-related enzymes or proteins to degrade the antibody or linker, so that drug will be engulfed by the tumor cell. But here it is hydrolyzable linker. So when it goes and binds the TROP2 receptor in this breast cancer cell, it gets hydrolyzed automatically when it binds, and the drug is released in the tumor microenvironment, not in the cell. So what happens when it is released in the tumor microenvironment? It results in something called as bystander effect. What is bystander effect? When it is released in the microenvironment, it will activate cytokines. It will release so many cytokines, stimulate the cells to release cytokines, and attracts the immune cells, so that not only the cell to which this is binding will get affected, but also the rest of the tumor cells will also die. And this is called bystander effect of the monoclonal antibodies. So what it dropped to? It is trophoblast cell surface antigen 2. It was initially discovered in trophoblast. However, the expression of TROP2 is dramatically increased in some of the cancers, and such expression leads to poor prognosis. What are the cancers that overexpress TROP2? Breast, ovary, pancreas, urothelial, head and neck squamous cell carcinoma, gastric cancer. So when it is overexpressed, definitely, and it is when it is a driver, it leads to therapeutic target opportunity also. Hence, it is targeted. So this is the structure of saxituzumab govitecan. It has high drug to antibody ratio. It is humanized antibody. That's why it has fewer reactions, infusion reactions. This is the schema. This drug is given on day 1, day 8 at 10 mg per kg IV and in 21-day cycle. And the other arm is treatment choice of by the physician, which may be capecitabine, vinorelbine, or other drug, eribulin, etc. See the population that are included in this trial. The patients of metastatic TNBC who have received 2 or more chemotherapies. When we are saying more, there is no upper limit. They might have received 4 or 5 also. And at least even the population who have progressed after within 1 year of neoadjuvant therapy, they are also included in this. The primary endpoint definitely it is PFS, and secondary is OS and safety. See the PFS benefit. It is really significant. In the physician's choice of chemotherapy, it is 1.7 months PFS benefit, whereas in saxituzumab govitecan, it is 5.6 months, and it is statistically significant. The PFS benefit is significant so much. And even overall survival, it is benefit. It is double nearly. It is 6.7 months in the standard of care arm, whereas 12 months in this SJ arm. And it is again statistically significant. Response rates are also almost, you can see 35% in the SJ arm, whereas only 5% in the chemotherapy arm. 5% versus 35%. So coming to toxicity profile, so whenever a drug is showing so much efficacy, the next thing we look upon is toxicity. And most of the toxicities with saxituzumab govitecan is related to like irinotecan, the drug conjugate. So neutropenia, anemia, diarrhea, nausea, and alopecia. So coming to the conclusion, ASCENT is first phase 3 study of ADC with the significant PFS and OS in this metastatic heavily treated TNBC, and with relatively good clinical activity and safety profile. So with this, I conclude the presentation of important abstracts from ESMO. There are some more important abstracts, but due to time constraint, we'll stop here. And thank you all for your attention.
Thank you so much, sir, for your time this evening with such a detailed presentation. So we have one question from the doctor, that any data on pancreatic cancer regarding sotorasib, sir?
See, in the sotorasib trial, it is basically a basket trial. It's in this ESMO they have presented NSCLC, but probably in the coming meetings and there is some abstract and in this ESMO J also, but the results are not complete. Definitely, it is a hopeful molecule. In the next ESMO, probably we can expect the results of sotorasib in rest of the solid cancers.
So it was a very excellent and informative session. You took your time out for this entire presentation. So we request any participants, if you have any question, you can unmute and ask, sir.
Sure.
Um, Sir, I hope there are no much more questions. But we thank you from our behalf for joining in and taking us through such a elaborative presentation in the evening, sir.
Thank
So
you.
thank you, sir, and we wish you a very good weekend ahead. And thank you,
Thank you
doctor.
for giving such an opportunity, and thank you all my friends and seniors, juniors for such an attention throughout the work.
Uh, Thank you, sir. So should we sign off?
Yeah.
Moment. Thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone who attended the meeting. And Ankit, you may sign off